Hey guys, you're watching Diary of Betrayal. Things are about to get crazy. Are you ready to dive into shocking stories of cheating and betrayal? Let's go.
An unopened envelope rested on Daniel Carter's kitchen counter for 3 days. He knew it contained divorce papers, their formal weight undeniable. Yet he wasn't prepared for the cheerful pink sticky note attached to it. In Laura's flowing, elegant handwriting, the note's casual cruelty stung sharply. "Sorry, darling," it read. "Your predictable stability just doesn't suit me anymore. Don't worry about the accounts. Eric and I will handle them far better than you could." Eric, his closest friend since college, had been the best man at their wedding 5 years earlier. Daniel stood alone in the quiet kitchen. Morning sunlight cast long shadows across the marble countertops they'd chosen together just a year ago. The house felt cavernous, every corner echoing the absence of her laughter, her music, her presence. With trembling hands, he opened their joint banking app, already dreading what he'd find. Zero. Everything was gone. 15 years of frugal living, sacrificing vacations and luxury cars to build a secure future while climbing the ranks at the Securities and Exchange Commission, had vanished. The transfer had happened 48 hours ago. Even their retirement savings were drained, though Daniel knew this would eventually land Laura in serious legal trouble. At 42, he stood amidst the wreckage of his life. The coffee maker gurgled in the background, its familiar sound now a mocking reminder of the routine he'd maintained for years. Up at 5:30 a.m., coffee and newspaper by 6, a kiss from Laura at 7, then off to the office. A life built on trust and consistency, shattered by a pink note and an empty bank account. Daniel walked to his home office, each step deliberate. His colleagues at the SEC's Enforcement Division often praised his meticulousness, his ability to stay calm while unraveling complex financial schemes. Like a machine, some said admiringly, others with disdain. Laura had started using the phrase too, lately. "You're like a machine, Daniel. Don't you ever feel anything?" Now he felt everything. Sitting at his desk and opening his laptop, a cold clarity settled within him. Not the heat of betrayal, but something sharper. His mind, honed by years of forensic accounting and fraud investigations, began dissecting the past 6 months, pinpointing subtle shifts in Laura's behavior. New Pilates classes, late nights at work, a sudden fascination with cryptocurrency investments supposedly recommended by Eric. The patterns he was trained to spot in financial crimes had been present in his own life, and he'd missed them or chosen not to see, letting hope outweigh his professional instincts. That would never happen again. Over the next few months, Daniel Carter threw himself into his work at the SEC with renewed vigor, earning a reputation as one of the agency's most relentless investigators. His cases boasted an exceptionally high conviction rate, though few realized it was because he now understood betrayal intimately, how people maintain convincing facades while plotting destruction. He sold the house, moved to a modest apartment in a different neighborhood. Colleagues noticed a change, more focused, more intense. Behind his calm exterior, the machine-like precision once mocked had become both armor and weapon. 2 years after Laura's departure, Daniel met Sarah Mitchell at a charity gala. At 34 to his 44, she seemed genuine, ambitious, her sharp wit shining through in thoughtful observations rather than cutting remarks. Their courtship was a whirlwind of intellectual discussions and shared dreams, culminating in marriage within 6 months. Looking back, Daniel would call this his only true mistake. He believed lightning couldn't strike twice, that his newfound caution and insight would shield him from further betrayal. In his modest SEC office, Daniel stared at a monitor displaying patterns that made his auditor's heart race. To most, the transaction data would seem unremarkable, just another set of successful investments tied to corporate mergers. But Daniel had spent years developing an almost uncanny ability to detect hidden threads connecting seemingly random financial events. A series of perfectly timed trades, executed just before the Mercury West merger announcement, caught his eye. The initial investments were carefully calibrated to stay below reporting thresholds. As he traced the web of shell companies and offshore accounts, a larger picture emerged. Another dataset revealed similar activity around a healthcare acquisition in November. Different company names and account numbers, but the same methodology. Each trade led to a small group of investors, all linked to his boss, Nathan Brooks. Daniel leaned back, adjusting his glasses, weighing the implications. Nathan Brooks was a rising star in the enforcement division, recently promoted to deputy director. His tailored suits and polished silver-haired persona exuded refined competence, his calculated charm winning allies within the agency. Lately, Nathan had shown unusual interest in Daniel's wife, Sarah, offering her a role as his executive assistant despite her limited administrative experience. "She has natural talent," Nathan insisted, flashing a dazzling smile. "We need fresh perspectives in leadership." A familiar chill settled in Daniel's chest. He recalled Laura's betrayal, the warning signs he'd ignored. Opening his private investigation notes, he added new connections to the web of relationships and transactions he'd been quietly mapping for 3 months. A soft click of heels announced Emily Harper's arrival. The head of corporate communications was one of the few Daniel truly trusted. Her sharp competence and unwavering integrity earned her more enemies than friends in power circles. "Those trades you're looking at," Emily said without preamble, closing the office door. "There's more. Check the Pavlovsky merger from last quarter." Someone knew about the failed negotiations 3 days before the public announcement. The short positions they took made millions when the stock crashed. Daniel nodded, already pulling up the data. Emily stood behind him, her presence a steady professional anchor. Unlike most colleagues, she never filled silence with pointless chatter. "The trading patterns match," he confirmed after a few minutes. "Same structure, just bigger sums. They're getting bolder or desperate." Emily's eyes narrowed as she studied the screens. "Have you noticed the frequency? 3 major deals in January alone. That's not confidence, it's escalation." Daniel felt a familiar click in his mind as pieces fell into place. "They need funds for something specific," he said slowly. "Something big." Emily's slight nod confirmed his suspicion. "The regulatory restructuring vote is in June," she reminded him. "A lot of positions and authority will be redistributed. Changes like that can make investigations disappear." The silence between them spoke volumes. If Nathan Brooks was involved in insider trading, gaining more influence in the enforcement division could bury any evidence. Proving it, however, was another matter. People like Nathan didn't leave obvious traces. "I'll need access to secure communication archives," Daniel said, already forming a strategy. "And maybe your media monitoring teams help." Emily's faint smile was genuine. "I'll have Sophie Bennett coordinate with you. She's young but excellent at spotting discrepancies between public statements and private messages." As Emily turned to leave, she paused at the door. "Daniel, be careful. I've heard rumors about Nathan's ties to powerful people and his interest in Sarah." Her words hung unfinished, but their meaning was clear. Daniel nodded, appreciating both the warning and her discretion. Alone again, he returned to his monitors, meticulously documenting every anomaly, every connection, every suspicious coincidence. Laura's betrayal had taught him that evidence was everything. But his years at the SEC showed him evidence alone wasn't enough. Leverage, timing, and a full understanding of the scheme's scope were critical before acting. His phone lit up with a text from Sarah, asking if he'd mind her staying late at work again. Nathan had a big presentation tomorrow, she explained, and needed help preparing materials. Daniel sent a brief, supportive reply, then added another entry to his private investigation file. A quote from his favorite philosopher surfaced in his mind. "All we hear is opinion, not fact. All we see is perspective, not truth." Truth, Daniel knew, lay in the data, in the patterns people unwittingly created through their actions. He had to find it before it was too late. February brought revelations that turned Daniel's suspicions into certainty. The financial misconduct he uncovered extended far beyond simple insider trading, weaving a complex web of corruption that entangled multiple levels of the SEC. His office became a command center, its walls lined with smart glass panels that could turn opaque with a button's press. On them, he mapped money flows and connections with an intricate color-coded system. Red for confirmed illicit trades, blue for suspected schemes under investigation, green for money laundering channels, yellow for personal ties that might prove significant. On a cold Tuesday morning, Nathan's operation came into sharp focus. Daniel arrived at the office well before most colleagues. The early hours is most productive for uninterrupted investigation. Reviewing new trade data, one pattern stood out: a series of precisely timed options trades spread across multiple accounts to evade detection. The names tied to the accounts were telling. Each major trade traced back to someone Nathan had been romantically involved with over the past 3 years. The pattern was elegantly simple. Nathan initiated relationships with individuals who could provide valuable information on upcoming mergers or regulations. The affair lasted just long enough to establish a trading scheme, then abruptly ended, though the trading continued, backed by implicit threats of exposure. Thomas Reed, an accountant, was a key player, laundering funds through a labyrinth of shell companies. Daniel had always found Thomas oddly anxious for someone in such a stable role. Now he understood why. The man was sitting on a powder keg of fraudulent transactions, each carefully disguised, but traceable if you knew where to look. The revelation that shook Daniel most came when he uncovered his brother-in-law, Mark's, involvement. Sarah's brother, a broker at a bank, funneled illicit funds through various offshore accounts, using his position to ensure they didn't trigger automated monitoring systems. Daniel leaned back, letting the implications sink in. Mark's role meant this had started before he even met Sarah. Did she know? Was their entire marriage part of Nathan's plan? The answer came in a batch of emails he decrypted later that day, buried in a message archive he'd been steadily cracking. Correspondence between Sarah and Nathan predated her meeting Daniel, discussing not only their affair, but long-term plans to seize key SEC positions through blackmail, fabricated evidence, and strategic appointments. Daniel's role was clearly defined, an unwitting source of legitimacy. His reputation for impeccable integrity shielded their activities. His destruction had been planned from the start, with Sarah meticulously documenting his potential weaknesses for Nathan. The betrayal was absolute, but this time Daniel felt only cold clarity. He'd suspected something since Nathan hired Sarah as his assistant, but seeing the evidence laid bare brought an odd sense of calm. Unlike with Laura, he wasn't a naive victim this time. He'd been gathering his own evidence from the beginning. March roared in with blizzards that mirrored the escalating intensity of Daniel's investigation. He turned his home office into a fortified hub with multiple backup systems safeguarding his evidence. His surveillance setup was a model of legal compliance, designed to collect only admissible proof. Every record, conversation, and document was obtained through proper channels, with impeccable chain of custody documentation. Years of pursuing financial criminals had taught Daniel that illegally obtained evidence could ruin a case. His coordination with trusted agents from the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network was meticulous. Special Agent Sophie Bennett was initially skeptical. Internal corruption cases were delicate, especially with high-ranking SEC officials involved. But the quality of Daniel's initial evidence convinced her to assign a small team. "Your documentation is better than what we get from seasoned investigators," she noted during a secure meeting at a nondescript cafe. "But we need more than trading patterns to make this stick. We need direct proof of intent." Daniel nodded, already planning the next phase. He knew from experience that people like Nathan grew careless when they thought they were winning. He just had to play the role of a devoted but unambitious husband, increasingly distracted by work and personal struggles. Sarah's behavior grew openly hostile, her contempt barely veiled by a thin layer of concern. "Nathan mentioned you've been working odd hours," she said one evening, her tone carefully calibrated to suggest worry rather than suspicion. "He's concerned you're struggling with the workload. You know you could talk to me, right?" Daniel noted how she slipped Nathan's name into the conversation, watching his reaction. He gave her what she expected, a slight tightening around the eyes, a subtle hunch in his shoulders. "Just tough cases," he replied, maintaining the guise of an unsuspecting spouse. "Nothing I can't handle." Later that night, he caught her trying to access his home office, testing the new electronic lock he'd installed. "I was just looking for aspirin," she said with a bright smile. "I forgot you changed the lock. Seems a bit paranoid, doesn't it?" Daniel mumbled something about cybersecurity and sensitive case materials, feigning discomfort at the confrontation. Inside, he felt only satisfaction. The evidence she sought was stored on multiple servers Emily had helped him set up. Each piece was meaningless alone, but devastating when combined. By late March, Daniel's arsenal was nearly complete. Every conversation was recorded, every document backed up, every connection mapped and verified. He'd build a case that would be nearly impossible to challenge, with multiple layers of redundancy, ensuring no single failure could derail the investigation. The hardest part was maintaining normalcy at work. Nathan intensified his efforts to appear as a mentor, frequently stopping by Daniel's office to offer unsolicited career advice and thinly veiled warnings about the importance of team loyalty. "You remind me of myself at your age," Nathan said during one visit, his performative charm barely masking a predatory assessment. "But you need to learn to relax, trust your colleagues more. Isolation can be dangerous in our line of work." Daniel nodded, playing the eager subordinate while mentally cataloging another piece of his documentation. Every interaction, every subtle thread, every attempt at manipulation was carefully recorded and categorized, bringing the moment of reckoning closer. In his darker moments, often late at night, reviewing surveillance footage or cross-referencing trade records, Daniel wondered if he'd become the very thing he hunted. The depth of his preparation, the cold precision of his actions, the careful manipulation of others' perceptions, weren't these the tools of the corrupt he sought to expose? But then he thought of Nathan's victims, small investors whose savings were wiped out by insider trading, honest employees whose careers were ruined by fabricated evidence, women whose lives were systematically destroyed by Nathan's blend of seduction and blackmail. This wasn't about revenge. It was about justice, about protecting those who couldn't protect themselves. Surveillance footage from Nathan's office told a particularly damning story. Through hidden cameras, Daniel watched Nathan conduct late-night meetings, each following the same pattern. A woman, typically someone from a company about to announce a merger or policy change, entered confident and professional. They left hours later, their composure shattered, unaware they'd traded their careers and integrity for what they believed was love or career advancement. Emily's research identified 15 such victims over the past 5 years. 3 had attempted suicide, 7 left the financial industry entirely, and the rest lived in constant fear, feeding information while watching their careers and reputations erode. "He doesn't just ruin their careers," Emily observed during a secure meeting in her office. "He breaks them as people, makes them complicit in their own destruction." Daniel nodded, understanding all too well. It's not enough for him to profit from their information. He needs to own them. The parallels to his own situation with Sarah became clearer as March drew to a close. Her attempts to access his files grew more frequent, her frustrations spilling into petty psychological warfare. She began inviting Nathan to dinner more often, staging intimate moments for Daniel to notice. Lingering touches, meaningful glances, inside jokes. "Nathan says you're asking a lot of questions about the Mercury West trades," she remarked casually one evening as they prepared for bed. "He's worried you're overworking, seeing conspiracies where there's just market noise." Daniel gave her the defensive response she expected, but inwardly noted the slight tremor in her hand as she applied night cream, the faint tension in her shoulders. She wasn't afraid of him discovering her affair with Nathan. That was meant to be found eventually part of his planned professional ruin. No, she was afraid because the trades he was investigating weren't supposed to be traceable at all. The final piece of Daniel's arsenal fell in a place in late March. Agent Sophie Bennett successfully flipped one of Nathan's junior staff, a young analyst named Jacob Ellis, who'd unknowingly processed some of the most suspicious trades. Jacob's testimony, combined with Daniel's mountain of documented evidence, made the case virtually airtight. "We need to move fast," Sophie warned during their final meeting. "The regulatory restructuring vote in June isn't the only deadline. My sources say Nathan's group is planning something massive, possibly their biggest insider trading operation yet. Daniel understood the urgency, but urged patience. We need their overconfidence, he explained. They think they're winning. Nathan's secure in his position. Sarah thinks I'm blind, and Thomas Reed is getting sloppy with his records. Let's give them enough rope. As March turned to April, Daniel felt an almost uncanny calm. His evidence was secure, his witnesses prepared, the trap set. Unlike Laura's betrayal, this one wouldn't end with him as the victim. This time, foresight would triumph, not just for him, but for all of Nathan's victims. The machine-like precision once mocked by colleagues had become his greatest asset. Where Nathan's group saw a predictable, unambitious bureaucrat, Daniel had forged a weapon of precision and patience. His boring reliability, once scorned by Laura, had evolved into something far more dangerous. The ability to wait, observe, and strike with devastating accuracy when a moment arrived. In quiet moments alone in his office, reviewing evidence one last time, Daniel allowed himself a small smile. Nathan and his conspirators had made the same mistake as Laura. They mistook his methodical nature for weakness, his patience for passivity, his quiet competence for limitation. Soon, they learned that sometimes the most dangerous predator is the one who watches, analyzes, and strikes only once, but with absolute precision. The stage was set. The first act of this carefully orchestrated drama was nearing its end. The players had revealed their true selves, the evidence was secured, and the machinery of justice was poised to act. All that remained was springing the trap at the perfect moment, when the conspirators' overconfidence would blind them to their impending downfall. Daniel closed his laptop. The soft click echoed in the silent office, like the sound of a prison door shutting. Early spring sunlight faded, painting the city in hues of gold and shadow. Tomorrow, the next phase of his plan would begin, but tonight he could sleep soundly, knowing this betrayal would have a very different ending. April brought blooming cherry blossoms to the city, their delicate beauty a stark contrast to the dark currents running through the SEC's enforcement division. Daniel's carefully cultivated image as a diligent but unassuming investigator finally earned him an invitation into Nathan Brooks' inner circle, an event that heightened both his risk and the investigation's pace. The invitation came during a seemingly casual lunch at the Golden Harvest, an upscale Italian restaurant favored by the city's elite. Nathan insisted on ordering for both, a display of dominance cloaked as generosity. "Daniel, I've been watching your work on the Pavlovsky case," Nathan said, swirling untouched wine in his glass. "You have a knack for details we could use in some special projects." Special projects, Daniel knew, was Nathan's euphemism for his shadier operations. "I'm always happy to support the division," Daniel replied cautiously, maintaining the facade of eager compliance. Good, Nathan said, his smile not reaching his eyes. "James Carter will reach out to coordinate." The mention of James Carter was significant. As Nathan's lieutenant, Carter operated in the shadows, handling the more ruthless aspects of their operations. Daniel had been compiling a separate dossier on him for months, documenting his systematic approach to blackmail and coercion. Carter wasted no time. The next morning, he appeared in Daniel's office, pointedly closing the door. The man was a study in contradictions. Expensive suit paired with scuffed shoes, manicured hands but chipped nails, polished corporate speak punctuated by bursts of street slang. "Nathan says you're reliable," Carter began without preamble. "We've got some board members who need managing. Your job is to find leverage." Over the next 2 hours, Carter outlined a parallel scheme to blackmail targeted board members of a company they planned to manipulate. It was bolder than Daniel expected, not just gathering compromising information, but actively creating compromising situations. "We've got a system," Carter explained, his pride in the operation evident. "Everyone's got a weakness: money, sex, family. We find it, use it, profit. Simple." Daniel played his role perfectly, asking enough questions to seem engaged while appearing slightly uneasy about the moral implications. Carter mistook this discomfort for the natural hesitation of an upright bureaucrat tasting real power for the first time. "Don't worry about ethics," Carter assured him with a predatory grin. "Everyone does it. We just do it better." The meeting was interrupted by Alex Turner, the SEC's IT director. Turner's arrival was no coincidence. Daniel had anticipated this phase of their operation. As another member of Nathan's inner circle, Turner ensured their digital tracks stayed hidden. "Sorry to interrupt," Turner said, sounding anything but apologetic. "Need to install a security update on all Enforcement Division computers. Won't take long." Daniel feigned distraction, appearing engrossed in his phone while Turner worked on his computer. In reality, he was recording every keystroke through a covert system Emily had helped him install months earlier. Turner was attempting to plant malware that would grant them access to Daniel's work files while monitoring his communications. "All set," Turner announced after a few minutes. "You shouldn't notice any changes, but let me know if anything seems off." Daniel nodded, offering a grateful half-smile. The malware would feed them exactly what they expected: a competent but uninspired investigator's work, interspersed with personal searches that reinforced their view of him as a man buckling under pressure. After they left, Daniel activated a secure communication channel to update Agent Sophie Bennett. The FBI was particularly interested in Carter's blackmail operation. "This is bigger than we thought," Sophie commented during their encrypted video call. "Carter's not just collecting dirt, he's manufacturing it. That takes resources, organization, and arrogance." "They're getting sloppy," Daniel added. Turner's malware install was rushed, amateurish. They don't expect real resistance. The rest of April unfolded in a flurry of carefully choreographed moves and countermoves. Daniel allowed himself to be drawn deeper into their confidence, attending private meetings where future targets and plans were discussed. Every conversation was recorded, every document meticulously stored on his secure servers. The most revealing meeting occurred late in the month at Nathan's private downtown club, over expensive whiskey and imported cigars. The inner circle discussed their plans for the upcoming regulatory restructuring. "Once the vote passes," Nathan explained, his usual polish slightly dulled by alcohol, "we'll have full control over investigations. Any irregularities can be buried before they reach the commission level." Daniel noticed Carter and Turner exchange glances at this statement. Clearly, they hadn't been told the full extent of Nathan's ambitions. The power dynamics in the room subtly shifted as each recalculated their place in this expanding operation. May arrived with unseasonable heat, accelerating the conspiracy's timeline. The first major move came from Mark, Daniel's brother-in-law, who tried to pressure him into signing over a power of attorney for his assets. "It's just a precaution," Mark insisted during an awkward dinner at his house. "Sarah's worried about you, Daniel. The hours you're working, the stress you're under. We want to make sure your interests are protected." Daniel noticed the slight twitch in Mark's left eye, a tell he'd observed during their occasional poker games. "I appreciate the concern," Daniel replied gently, "but I think I can manage my affairs." Mark's pressure intensified over the next few weeks, shifting from friendly concern to thinly veiled threats. "Changes are coming at the SEC," he warned during their next meeting. "Those who don't align properly might find themselves in trouble." The implied threat was clear, but Daniel had anticipated this stage. His assets were already protected by a complex system of trusts and legal structures that would take months to unravel. More importantly, he documented every instance of Mark's pressure, adding it to his growing arsenal of evidence. Thomas Reed's role in their strategy became evident in mid-May, when rumors of Daniel's supposed gambling addiction began to spread. The story was crafted with subtle finesse. No direct accusations, just concerned whispers about late-night visits to underground poker games and suspicious cash withdrawals. "We're worried about you," Nathan said during one of their regular meetings, his concern a masterpiece of false sincerity. "These rumors, I'm sure they're nothing, but in our position, perception is reality." Daniel played his part, appearing increasingly tense and defensive as the rumors grew. In reality, each new attack only confirmed the thoroughness of his preparation. He had documented proof, of every fabricated claim, every planted story, every manipulated transaction. The psychological warfare reached new heights during a series of social events orchestrated by Sarah. A dinner at their home was particularly brutal, a carefully staged display of humiliation designed to push Daniel toward a breakdown. Sarah and Nathan's flirtation was overt but subtle enough to maintain plausible deniability. Their inside jokes and lingering touches were calibrated to be noticed by all, especially Daniel. The other guests, all members of Nathan's conspiracy, watched the unfolding drama with barely concealed amusement. "Nathan's been such a mentor to me," Sarah gushed over dessert, her hand resting on Nathan's arm. "He sees potential in people others overlook." The double meaning was clear to everyone present. Daniel maintained an air of stoic discomfort, secretly recording every interaction, every subtle exchange, every compromising detail. June brought an escalation in their financial operations. Daniel and Emily documented over $50 million in illicit trades, meticulously tracing them through a maze of shell companies and offshore accounts. The human cost of their scheme became increasingly apparent. Small investors ruined by market manipulations, pension funds gutted by insider trading, careers destroyed by fabricated evidence. "They're getting careless," Emily noted during a secure meeting. "The trades are bigger, more frequent. They think they're untouchable." Daniel nodded, reviewing the latest data. "Pride comes before the fall," he quoted softly. "They're so convinced of their superiority, they can't imagine being outsmarted." The conspirators' confidence indeed reached dangerous levels. Carter began openly discussing his blackmail targets in the office, convinced their control over the division made detection impossible. Turner grew lax in his security, leaving digital traces Daniel's covert systems easily captured. Even Nathan, typically the most cautious, began to show cracks in his polished facade. During a late-night strategy session, he revealed more than intended about his ultimate goals. "It's not just about money," he declared, expensive whiskey loosening his tongue. "It's about power, real power, the kind that lets you rewrite the rules, not just break them." Daniel recorded every word, adding it to his comprehensive documentation of their operation. The evidence was irrefutable, not only of financial crimes, but of a systematic attempt to undermine the very institutions meant to prevent such abuses. In the final phase of Daniel's counteroperation, working with Agent Sophie Bennett and Emily, he carefully leaked information about a fictitious merger between two major tech companies. The bait was irresistible, a potential profit of hundreds of millions, seemingly risk-free. "Sources say the deal's all but signed," Daniel mentioned casually during one of Nathan's strategy sessions. "Just waiting for the final signatures." The conspirators moved quickly, as Daniel predicted. Within days, their network of accounts began positioning to capitalize on the non-existent merger. Each trade triggered sophisticated monitoring protocols Daniel had quietly installed months earlier. "They're all in," Sophie confirmed during their final planning session. "Every major player in their network has taken a position. When this collapses, they'll lose everything. And we'll have documented proof of their insider trading attempt," Daniel finished. Sarah made her move during this period, draining their joint accounts in a single day. Daniel allowed himself a small smile when he received the bank notification. The accounts she'd emptied were carefully constructed decoys, holding only a fraction of their real assets. Her attempt to encumber their home met similar frustration. Daniel had spent months erecting legal barriers that would take significant time to challenge, ensuring any attempt to seize their assets would be tied up in court long enough for his plan to succeed. The trap was set, the evidence secured, all players in position. Daniel sat in his office late at night, reviewing final preparations. On his screens, he could see the full scope of their operation. Every trade, every email, every conversation, meticulously documented and correlated. He thought of Laura's betrayal 5 years ago, how it had forged him into someone capable of orchestrating this intricate counterattack. The machine-like qualities once mocked had become his greatest weapon, allowing him to maintain his facade while systematically dismantling their conspiracy. Tomorrow, the final act of this drama would begin. The stage was set, the actors in place, unaware that their carefully planned tragedy was about to become their own undoing. Daniel closed his laptop. The soft click echoed in the quiet office, like the sound of a trap snapping shut. The game was nearly over, and the players didn't even know they'd already lost. The SEC's annual summer gala transformed the Grand Hall of the National Museum of Art into a glittering showcase of power and pretense. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light over marble columns, a string quartet filling the air with soft music. For Daniel Carter, observing from a quiet corner, it was the perfect stage for Nathan Brooks' final performance. He'd chosen this evening deliberately. The gala brought together the entire financial regulatory community, SEC officials, Justice Department representatives, and heads of major financial institutions. Everyone who needed to witness what was about to unfold was present. Emily Harper appeared beside him, striking in a midnight blue gown. "Our friends from the Bureau are in position," she whispered, accepting a champagne flute from a passing waiter. "The catering uniforms make excellent cover." Daniel nodded, his focus on Nathan and Sarah. They'd been working the room separately all evening, building anticipation for their dramatic performance. Nathan, impeccable in a custom suit, charmed the crowd with his usual ease. Sarah, in a dress worth more than most employees' monthly salaries, positioned herself strategically near the main stage. The timing was precise, synchronized with the chairman's scheduled speech. As the formal portion of the evening began, Nathan moved towards Sarah. The movement drew eyes, exactly as intended. "Ladies and gentlemen," the chairman began, "tonight we celebrate another year of safeguarding our financial markets." His speech was cut short by the sharp crash of champagne flute. Sarah had dropped it deliberately, creating the dramatic opening she and Nathan had planned. Before the echo faded, she kissed Nathan. The room fell silent. Hundreds of eyes turned to witness the carefully staged scandal. Daniel could see his colleagues' reactions: shock, embarrassment, cruel amusement. This was the moment Nathan and Sarah had planned for months. The public humiliation of Daniel Carter, the dull, cuckolded bureaucrat. "I can't pretend anymore," Sarah declared, her voice carrying through the stunned silence. "Nathan and I are in love. We've been in love for months. I'm tired of living a lie with a man who cares more about his spreadsheets than his wife." Nathan stepped forward, slipping into his rehearsed role as the reluctant romantic hero. "Daniel, I never wanted this to happen," he said, pausing for effect. "But Sarah and I, we can't deny our feelings any longer." He paused again, then added, "And since we're being honest, your recent behavior has raised serious concerns about your fitness for your role." The trap had sprung. Now it was Daniel's turn to act. "Interesting timing," he said quietly, his voice somehow cutting through the hushed room. "Do those concerns have anything to do with the Mercury West investigation? Or perhaps the Pavlovsky merger trades?" Nathan's confident smile faltered slightly. Daniel stepped forward, each movement measured. "You know what's always fascinated me about financial crimes?" he continued, nearing the room's center. "The patterns, the connections, how everything leaves a trace if you know where to look." A subtle signal, and the catering staff began moving, quietly blocking exits. "For instance," Daniel went on, "when someone orchestrates a sophisticated insider trading scheme tied to multiple corporate mergers, they typically need three things: inside information, a way to hide the trades, and a mechanism to launder the profits." He turned to face the crowd, his voice taking on the calm precision he used when presenting evidence. "Over the past year, I've documented how Nathan Brooks and his associates stole over $50 million through insider trading, blackmail, and securities fraud. Every trade, every threat, every transfer, it's all been captured, verified, and preserved." Murmurs rippled through the room. Nathan's face darkened. "You're delusional," he snapped. "This is why you need to be removed." "Everyone stay where you are," came shouts from various points as agents shed their catering disguises. "Remain in place," Sophie Bennett announced, stepping forward with her badge raised. "Nathan Brooks, you're under arrest for securities fraud, racketeering, and conspiracy. The next few minutes unfolded like a meticulously rehearsed dance. Agents moved through the crowd with precision, detaining key members of Nathan's conspiracy. Thomas Reed tried to flee but was apprehended before reaching the exit. James Carter attempted to delete files from his phone, only to find it remotely locked. Alex Turner stood frozen, his face ashen as agents approached. Sarah's reaction shifted from shock to fury. "You bastard," she hissed at Daniel. "You planned this." "No, Sarah," Daniel replied calmly. "You planned it. I just rewrote the ending." As she was led away in handcuffs, Daniel handed Sophie Bennett the final flash drive. "It's all here," he said. Emails, recordings, financial records, including proof of how they plan to use tonight's performance to justify my firing and bury the investigation. The gala descended into chaos as pre-alerted reporters arrived. Camera flashes lit up the night through the museum's windows, capturing the procession of handcuffed conspirators to waiting vehicles. The arrests made headlines nationwide. Corruption uncovered at SEC, massive insider trading ring dismantled. Cable news dissected the scandal endlessly, debating how such widespread corruption went undetected for so long. Nathan's attempt to destroy evidence proved futile. Daniel had anticipated his first move, ordering Alex Turner to initiate a full data wipe. But the SEC's real servers had been quietly backed up months earlier, every file and message preserved in secure systems. The first crack in the conspirators' unity came from an unexpected source. Mark, Daniel's brother-in-law, attempted suicide in his home 3 days after the arrests. His housekeeper found him in time, but the attempt revealed the depth of his involvement and fear. From his hospital bed, Mark became the first to testify against his co-conspirators. His statements detailed how Nathan built his network, using a mix of blackmail, bribery, and manipulation to create a web of compromised officials and industry insiders. It felt exhilarating at first. Mark told prosecutors, his voice barely audible, like we were smarter than everyone else, like we deserved more than the rules allowed. By the time I realized how deep we were, it was too late. He had evidence of everything. Thomas Reed's attempt to flee was both desperate and ill-conceived. He tried to leave the country, but was caught at the border. His laptop contained additional evidence of money laundering operations Daniel hadn't uncovered, including ties to Eastern European crime syndicates. James Carter's response to the arrest revealed why Nathan valued him as an enforcer. He tried to pin everything on Nathan, portraying himself as another victim of manipulation. But Daniel's evidence was too comprehensive, including recordings of Carter gleefully discussing his blackmail operations. "You don't get it." Carter had boasted to Daniel months earlier, unaware of the recording devices. "Everyone's got a weakness. Find it, use it, profit. Nathan taught me that, but I made it an art." That recording, combined with detailed documentation of Carter's methods, led to additional charges. Investigators found he'd run a side operation, blackmailing board members and executives beyond Nathan's targets, pocketing the profits. The investigation expanded beyond the initial conspiracy as more evidence surfaced. Several prominent figures were implicated in the trading schemes. 2 hedge fund managers faced criminal charges for their role in laundering profits. A senior aide resigned after evidence emerged of his role in quashing earlier investigations. Sarah's attempt to claim spousal privilege failed spectacularly. Daniel's evidence showed her active participation in the conspiracy predated their marriage, which itself was part of the scheme. Emails between her and Nathan, discussing how to use the marriage to shield their operations, destroyed any chance of claiming ignorance or coercion. "I almost admire the thoroughness," Sophie Bennett commented, reviewing the evidence. They planned everything, except the possibility that the quiet guy they were using might outsmart them. The preliminary hearings became media spectacles. News cameras tracked every arrival and departure at the courthouse. Nathan maintained his polished demeanor, but stress showed in his eyes and new lines around his mouth. The sentencing hearing in December drew global attention. The courtroom was packed with journalists, financial industry observers, and victims of the conspiracy schemes. Daniel sat quietly in the back, Emily beside him, as Judge Caroline Matthews prepared to deliver her ruling. Nathan's final courtroom statement showcased both his arrogance and his inability to grasp his downfall. "Everything I did was standard practice in our financial system," he declared. "The only difference between me and any other successful financier is that I was more efficient, more effective at the game." The judge's response was scathing. "The game you describe, Mr. Brooks, is the financial security of hardworking people. Your actions destroyed retirement savings, wiped out lifetimes of wealth, and undermined trust in the very institutions meant to protect investors." The sentences reflected the crime's severity. Nathan received 20 years for racketeering, securities fraud, and conspiracy, with the judge noting the systematic nature of his crimes and abuse of authority as aggravating factors. Sarah's 12-year sentence triggered her first real display of emotion since her arrest. Her carefully crafted facade cracked as she realized the scale of her fall. Her attempts to portray herself as Nathan's victim were systematically dismantled by evidence of her eager participation. Other conspirators received sentences ranging from 5 to 15 years, depending on their involvement and cooperation with prosecutors. Mark's suicide attempt and subsequent cooperation earned him a lighter 5-year sentence. Thomas Reed's attempted flight and broader criminal ties led to 15 years. Carter's separate blackmail operation added charges, bringing his total to 13 years. Daniel's appointment as head of the enforcement division was a natural outcome of his role in dismantling the conspiracy. His confirmation hearings before the SEC turned into a broader discussion on preventing future criminal infiltration of the agency. His first actions as director showcased both his foresight and commitment to reform. He implemented advanced monitoring systems to detect suspicious trading patterns and relationships. New anti-corruption measures included regular staff rotations and heightened oversight of internal communications. The reforms extended beyond the SEC. Whistleblower rewards and civil settlements from the case brought Daniel significant financial compensation, though it felt almost trivial compared to the broader impact of his actions. A compensation fund for victims of the conspiracy's trading schemes helped restore some faith in the system's ability to protect ordinary investors. One snowy morning, Daniel stood in his new corner office, watching the city below. The world seemed cleaner, though he knew it was his own sense of closure coloring his perception. A knock at the door announced Emily's arrival, carrying takeout containers and a stack of case files, their usual working lunch setup. Their professional partnership had naturally evolved into something deeper, rooted in shared experiences and a mutual understanding of what it meant to confront corruption. "Ready for round 2? She asked, setting out the containers. "How about some intriguing patterns in the tech sector? Could be nothing, or the next big case." Daniel smiled, feeling the familiar click in his mind as patterns began to emerge from seemingly random data points. The quiet man everyone underestimated had become something else entirely. A machine, as he'd once been mocked, now a guardian of the system's integrity. The snow continued to fall outside, softening the city's sharp edges into something new. Daniel knew there would always be people like Nathan, Sarah, and the others, those who saw rules as obstacles and trust as a weapon. But he'd learned how to fight them, turning their own methods against them, protecting the system they sought to undermine. As he and Emily reviewed the new cases, Daniel reflected that true revenge wasn't just about punishment, it was about building something better from betrayal's ashes. He transformed personal pain into institutional change, private vengeance into public justice. The conspirators had mistaken his patience for weakness, his planning for passivity, his calm for fear. They never understood that sometimes the most dangerous predator is the one who watches, waits, and strikes only once, but decisively. The SEC's reforms would be his true legacy, safeguarding future investors from those who would exploit them. And if new threats arose, he'd be ready, watching from his quiet corner, protecting the system with the same patience and precision that brought down Nathan's conspiracy.